Emma.
Yes, Madelyn.
What do you call it when you're working as a chauffeur for like the King of England, and it sucks and it's kind of scary because traffic is really bad?
I don't know. What do you call it?
Survival horror. Hello, and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your vroom vroom, finally my Subaru Outback in a game sort of host, Madelyn.
I'm your The Return host, Emma.
No.
I was gonna say there's not really any survival horror this week, but
There's a survival game.
yeah. I was just gonna say unless you consider like listening to
it is
my
kind
years
of survival horror to have to
Cold
listen to
Steel
Emma talk
reports.
about a Trails game. I can't believe you put this in the hat.
I mean, it's now 10 years old, both by its original release and by its Western release, so...
I'm not saying I can't believe that it's eligible to be in the hat.
But it is.
It feels like an addict behavior.
Look forward to November, if things go as planned, in my games plan.
Emma is so... Meanwhile, Emma and I were texting yesterday. I was like, maybe in November I can like sit down and play a game.
So can I.
Maybe I am. Whatever. This is 6 weeks stuff. I am starting to get that like, ooh, maybe it's my hour of need for another RGG game. You know, maybe it's time to fire up one of my remaining ones. Anyway, we're not talking about this week. We're talking about The Legend of Heroes: Trails in the Sky, and we're talking about Pacific Drive, which is pretty good because I was out in the Pacific this week, not the Pacific Northwest. I didn't see the ocean, but I was in the Pacific time zone.
Were you driving?
I wasn't driving.
But somebody was.
Significant amount of being driven. In fact, the chauffeur joke is in fact about me.
Yeah. That makes sense. Or about your Uber driver, I guess.
My Uber driver, all the volunteers I make drive me around.
Right.
Like, my friends.
Yeah.
I am the survival horror. But we're not talking about that yet. It's not even survival horror, really. There's like 17. Every article about Pacific Drive is a different pun about its genre. But first, buckle up.
It's time. Yes, our old game is The Legend of Heroes: Trails in the Sky, which I was thinking about this right before we started recording because you just brought up RGG, and there was just this like interview about like their fast release cadence.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think that Nihon Falcom is like a very comparable company to the way that RGG does things, except rather than like update their graphics, right? They just increase the amount of text that is in the game with each one that they release. Yeah. But they have a very similar release cadence, if not like somehow faster than RGG does, between the Trails series, right, and the Yes series, which we've talked about relatively recently, actually. They have like yearly releases, if not faster than that, with like remasters and re-releases in between.
I just feel like they haven't had quite the Western breakout yet, and people aren't noticing.
Yes.
When is our Amazon Prime,
They have not gotten to the, RGG has just finally reached worldwide release, right? Yeah. They have not gotten there, partially because Falcom is still not at the point where they're providing scripts during development, which you sort of have to do if you want a worldwide release, right? So a lot of the times they're getting, like 10 novels worth of words to translate after it's already been released in Japan. So I think what's stopping the Trails breakthrough, although I feel like it's been picking up a little bit lately, but what's stopping the Trails breakthrough is because there's like very long delays between when a game is released in Japan and when it comes out here. Because I think they've gotten to the point where they're 2 games behind now and doing their darndest to catch up. Because they just released, newest release in the West is Trails of Daybreak, and Trails of Daybreak 2 is coming out early next year. So pretty fast.
Well, Trails in the Sky takes it all the way back to the beginning. It is the first game in the Trails series. It is not the first game, we've talked about this before, I think, but it is not the first game in the Legend of Heroes series, although the Legend of Heroes series, like, functionally is not separate from the Trails series since the release of this game.
Yes. I was thinking, like, didn't we talk about this? Did we talk about, like, the original Legend of Heroes at some point? But I couldn't find it in our archives.
I don't know why we would have had... I don't know why I have that knowledge in my head. Or like,
maybe it came up during Yes, or maybe it came up during the early days when I was playing the first Cold Steel game. But we don't seem to have done one on the original Legend of Heroes. And as you said, it's basically just the Trails series now. They haven't released any others other than that.
Which I think is really funny. I mean, just cut the super title at this point.
It's sort of like Shin Megami Tensei, right? Technically, that came off of Megami Tensei, but that doesn't exist anymore, right?
Fair enough. But in the West, Shin Megami Tensei doesn't mean anything. Those are gibberish words.
I know, you're right. There's no meaning behind those words.
Anyway, The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky is 2004 RPG from Nihon Falcom, as Emma said. First in the Trails series, like the 5th or 6th in the Legend of Heroes series, but that is now just the Trails series. It's also known as Trails in the Sky FC, which it took me a really embarrassingly long time in reading about this to figure out stands for First Chapter.
Yes.
And not like Football Club.
Football Club. And then Soccer Club.
Yeah, Football Club and then Soccer Club.
Yeah.
It's an easy misunderstanding.
Exactly.
It was only when I saw like a contemporary review referring to it as First Chapter that I was like, where did they get that from? Like, what's that from? FC, of course.
Yes.
First released in Japan, as Emma said, off her PC, and then they ported it to the PSP in 2006. But it didn't come to North America until 2011. It was apparently a real localization challenge. As Emma said, these games have a lot of text. First one, 1.5 million Japanese characters. So Xseed had a little bit of a challenge on their hands. Sounds like it wasn't a lot of fun.
Yes. And for reference, the reason why it's First Chapter and Second Chapter is it was originally conceived of as one game, but Falcom split it up for size concerns.
Yes, that would have been like a 200-hour game. Right?
Yeah, it would have been quite long, because Second Chapter is about double the size of First Chapter.
Wowza.
At least in terms of words. So, for context, Second Chapter in English is about 716,400 words.
Yikes.
Which is roughly the size of 10 novels, since a helpful Kotaku interview from Jason Schreier.
I love to read.
Which isn't like, that's not like the main story is 700,000 words, sure. Right? The main gimmick, one of the main gimmicks of Trails, which I think we've talked about before, is the evolving NPC dialogue. So at different points in the story, as things have happened, NPCs will also have little sub-stories that you can follow by talking to them at different points in the game. So there aren't like shopkeepers that like have like one line of dialogue, or people in town that will say the same thing no matter what's happening, or maybe we'll change it once. Like, they will change like each chapter essentially, and sometimes we'll have extended conversations. So this ups the text size of things by the text numbers by a whole lot compared to other similar sized in terms of length RPGs.
And despite being the start of the series, Trails in the Sky has not been like, it's not been inaccessible to play, but it's not been as accessible to play as it could be. It's on PC and it's available on Steam. And in Japan, it was ported to the PlayStation 3 and to the Vita. But in the West, you really had to play it on PC. And also, like, it's a game that came out in 2004. So, like, at your peril, right?
Well, it was originally released for the Portable, is the first way that it came to the PlayStation Portable in 2011. and they didn't get a deal to put it on PC until second chapter, because Falcom was strangely stubborn about it, as tends to be sort of the case for everything I read about Falcom, is that they're strangely stubborn about things.
Strangely stubborn.
But, you know, by the time second chapter was coming out, the PSP was, like, not a system that was active anymore. And so, especially considering, like, the horrific sales of first chapter in the West, they were really trying to get it on PC to, like, recoup costs, because they thought people would actually buy it there.
And now, finally, they've just announced, after, like, a whole run-up of rumors, that there's going to be a remake, Trails in the Sky the First. Just to make
They're apparently talking to Western publishers at TGS.
Which is so weird. Really weird to me. They're like, it's coming in 2005. We don't have a publisher in the West.
2005, wow.
I'm sorry, it's coming in 2025. We don't have a publisher in
I read
West.
an article that they were surprised that Nintendo put it in their Direct.
That's a crazy sentence to
I know. I was like, what do you mean? You just
that
like
can't be how
emailed?
Nintendo Directs
You just
work.
like emailed Miyamoto or something? We're like, you know,
to
if
be
you've got
fair,
time.
It had a longer showcase in the Japan Direct than it did in the Western one. So I guess there could have been some confusion of like, oh, what they like slipped it in at the last minute because they had an extra 30 seconds into the Western one. But that just does not feel like something like how a Nintendo Direct works. It doesn't feel
right?
like you can be surprised. Like, what a horrible piece of hope to put out there for other developers. Like, oh, surprising. My game's in the Nintendo Direct. Like, they didn't even let me know.
Yeah, but when it was announced, they did not have a Western publisher yet, which is interesting.
So that's coming, and people are excited about it. And all the people online now seem to be like, well, you must start the series here.
Well, I think that is why they're revamping it. Honestly, I would have taken just like a console port, and I think that probably would have been fine. But if they want to remake it, then more power to them. I do wonder if they will do the other ones, or if they will just leave those as is. Who knows?
Yeah, this was a question too. So first of all, we should probably tell you a little bit more about like, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've heard Emma talk about all of the Trails of Cold Steel games.
Yes.
But also, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you may have lost the thread of what those games are really actually about, and not just about kind of hating Reen.
Yes. Cold Steel is also the third, like, sub-series within the Trails chronology, so Sky is the first.
So, it tells the story of Estelle Bright and her adopted brother Joshua. Side note, maybe I paid close attention to this, right? But I feel like there are a lot of Joshuas in, like, Japanese role-playing games. Like, a weird amount.
Maybe, yeah.
It's not a Japanese name. If anyone else can like back up that feeling, please let me know, because like, yeah, I feel like it shows up weirdly often for a name that is not at all culturally anything.
Sure.
But they live in the country of Libery, and they are in training to become bracers.
I think it's liberal.
Is it really? It is liberal. You're
Yeah.
right. That did not make any sense to my brain. I was like, that can't be.
Yeah.
But
No,
you're
I
right.
think
It
it's
is
liberal.
liberal. I thought it was just a typo that I'd capitalized the I. They live in the country of liberal. The country of Libery would be pretty cool.
That is a good name, yeah.
I would localize it that way. But they're training to become bracers, like Peace Corps guys, basically. And then a bunch of stuff happens.
Yeah. That's a good way to sum it up, really.
Like, they're doing that, then a bunch of stuff happens along the way with a lot of turn-based, grid-based battling.
Yeah. I think the inciting event for the first game is that Estelle and I guess Joshua's father goes missing. And so they end up sort of setting off to do some bracer duties as well. And run into a bunch of characters and get embroiled in, a larger conspiracy plot, as tends to happen in RPGs. And then the first chapter ends on a big honkin' cliffhanger. And then if you were in the West, you had to wait for a very long time, comparatively.
There are not enough cliffhangers in games anymore. I'll put that out there. And which is fine because it takes 7 years to make a game.
Yeah.
But I do feel like we as a society have moved away from the cliffhanger in a way that maybe we could use a little bit more of that energy.
Maybe you would like Trails.
Here's the thing. Here's what I'm really worried about in myself. Here's the thing I'm worried about for me. I was reading about this and I was like, oh man, you know what I love? You know what I love? Is when I have a big series of things. Yeah. I love a series. I love not running out of content.
I mean, honestly, if you like the way that Yakuza is a very long but chronological and connected story over time, then you will probably find some appeal in the idea of Trails.
And I feel terror about that. Because as I was preparing for this podcast, I was reading this, and on one hand, I was like, oh my god, like, these games, you spend like 100 hours in these games, and you like have to start at the beginning, and that's crazy, like, who has time for that? And then I thought to myself, like, okay, the Yakuza games aren't 100 hours long, except like maybe 5, but easily like 50 hours, probably. And I've played, how many of those now? 9 of them? So, it's in there.
Not all of Trails, not every Trails game is 100 hours long, I feel like I should say. 3 and 4 in Cold Steel, I feel like, are significantly longer than a lot of the other series, but they are definitely like 60 to 80 hours, sort of time commitments.
I do feel, well, so to speak to your point though, if they're creating this remake with the idea of we want people to start at the beginning and play it all the way through, which it's interesting timing for that, right? Like, I mean, again, not to compare it to the Yakuza series, right? But I feel like they started doing the remakes after like 0 kind of blew up, which made it a good moment to be like, let's connect this so people can actually play the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I feel like the Trails series has had that similar like cultural moment. It's more popular than it's ever been, certainly. But
well, I'm just like, comparatively to the very disastrous launch of Trails in the Sky first chapter, it is quite a bit more popular. They're putting, the Trails Cold Steel is like on every system now, right? It's not just sort of locked to whatever. They went back and actually officially localized the sub-series in between Sky and Steel. So there's clearly some sense, at least on their side, that they're actually getting some sort of market out of this. Anyway, to talk about Sky a little bit more,
I want to finish my thought though, related to your thought, which is that even when they make this game, Trails in the Sky second chapter and whatever the third one is, are still like
the third, I think it's called.
Third, thanks. Are still like ancient games only on PC.
Yeah. But there's a Steam Deck now. So
you're right. Gosh. See, I was about to say, like, man, if they'd put this on the Switch, like, maybe. And this one is coming to the Switch. So, oh no. I can't do that to the listeners. I can't like be like, let's do this again. Let's start over. Okay, go ahead, please.
Something I did find funny, there was I found on Reddit like a translated like 2006 interview from scenario staff Hideyoshi Takieri, who like really emphasized that like this is like the Legend of Heroes' first female protagonist, and that they did that specifically because they wanted it to like sort of feel different. So they sort of conceptualized like this sort of girl-boy protagonist dynamic with the girl in the lead. And they have not done one since.
Bad idea.
And they're like, okay, that's enough.
Tried that.
We did Estelle. They also mentioned, so Estelle is very like bright and cheerful, right? And Joshua is very more solemn, I guess. And apparently at some point in development, they were swapped. So they had very bright and cheerful Joshua and a very sort of solemn and serious Estelle, which is very funny to think about for me.
Yeah, especially with where this game ends. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll give that option in the remake. Personality swap.
This is another one, I guess, like Lunar, where they just like the trope of sort of like adopted. It's sort of like childhood friends, I guess, except they partly grew up in the same house.
Yeah,
but
childhood friend, but closer.
Yeah. So, you know, this is the main romance is between Estelle and Joshua, which may squick some people out. Trails certainly has some sub stuff that will squick you out. Yeah. I think that's the main sort of content warning I give to it. Estelle and Joshua don't really do that because he doesn't come to live with her until he's like, they're like 12, it seems like. So,
sure.
It just seems different than like if you were really raised together,
sure.
Right?
A clueless situation.
Yeah. Yeah, like yeah, a clueless situation. That's a good way to put it. That's how I'll describe it from now on.
He's just like Paul Rudd.
But it is interesting that it's sort of like a trope that comes up. I don't know what it's from. Convenient person that lives in the same house as you. Is that what the trope is from? No,
they're like, how do we get people who feel the same way about this parental figure without them actually both having that person as a parent?
Yeah, that's fair too.
It is interesting to think about kind of the narrative necessity of that, I guess, if you're going to center something around like a missing older figure or something.
Yeah.
How do you make the two characters equally invested in that? I should not get this game. I have so many games.
You could wait for the remake and
well, no, I know. I'm not going to
try it out.
It probably doesn't even play on Mac, right? Like,
I have no idea. I did not check.
I don't and should not have a gaming PC. I don't and should not have a Steam Deck. Like, I have not earned that.
You haven't earned the Steam Deck.
I have not earned the privilege of owning a Steam Deck. I need to play the games that I have.
That's fair.
So we can't contemplate that. But when the remake comes out, oh, spare a thought. When is it going to come out? They haven't announced a date yet.
They've just said like early 2025. And who knows if it'll be a worldwide release.
They've been saying worldwide release, which is a crazy thing to be saying given that they do not have a Western publisher.
I know.
They have been saying it. They've also been saying maybe they'll handle it themselves.
Well, it does seem like from screenshots that they are using the translation, the same translation as the original. So in that way, there's not any work, and I severely doubt at this point that they will be doing like a full English dub. The originals don't. I think the English dub only started with Cold Steel. Yeah, that makes sense because they didn't bring the other ones over. But so I doubt there'll be anything besides like battle quotes, and who knows if they'll just use the original audio files for that as well.
I don't even want an English dub with a game this big, honestly. I saw some other people saying that online too.
Yeah, I don't want a full English dub. I do sometimes appreciate when important scenes are voiced, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I see that.
I've been noticing that in myself lately. I'm like, okay, like, I don't mind reading. I don't actually need you to read to me. I don't mind reading.
Yeah.
Like 10 novels worth of game here. I can read it.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
One more fun fact about Trails in the Sky. When Nihon Falcom, they've since changed this, but when they were making the game, if you check a chest that you've already opened, it'll, they've got like a string there that's like the chest is empty. But in the way they were originally doing it, they copied a unique string for every single chest. So technically the message was like attached to each chest specifically. So one of the fun things about the English translation of the Sky games is they added like different weird little chest lines that will play every time you examine an empty chest. So either it'll be very bad puns, or it'll be like encouraging you at certain points of the story or commenting on things that have happened. which they were able to do because every single chest had like a unique string attached to it for some reason. But it's since changed the way they coded that, so Cold Steel does not have that quirk, unfortunately. But I do find that idea very charming of like checking the chest, and it's like, hey, stupid, I'm empty.
Must have been good stress relief for these translators who were working like 12-hour days for weeks in a row.
The translation process did sound like hell. Absolute hell.
Yeah. I also thought for sure this game would have a giant and detailed Wikipedia summary. This felt like the kind of game... I was bracing myself as I was starting my research to have to read through a really detailed Wikipedia rundown with a bunch of character names that I would not internalize. But it doesn't. Just 2 paragraphs. So that's what you get when the game did not sell well in the West and has not really been, like, sent over for modern players to the West, I guess.
Yeah.
I had to go to somebody else's Reddit explainer to understand the plot point where a character gets drugged. I was like, that seems bad. That seems bad. So let me go read what this actually is.
It's still bad, but not in the way that you might have been thinking.
Yeah, it's like, okay, like, this makes much more sense now. I was like, that's weird.
Well, any last thoughts about Trails in the Sky?
I'm in danger.
Trails is such a huge series that it's hard to talk about in like half an hour.
I really probably should just like get very into like Brandon Sanderson or something, you know, instead of this.
I feel like there's crossover appeal there.
Yeah.
If you like Brandon Sanderson, you may like Trails.
Have they considered having him localized? Him publish?
Just personally. Who knows?
Man, if somebody made games out of those books, that would go crazy, probably. That'd bring a whole new group to games.
That's true.
Oh, vroom vroom, beep beep.
Car coming through.
It's Pacific Drive time.
It's Pacific Drive. Tell us about Pacific Drive, Madelyn.
It's a 2024 survival game, or survival game if you're me, or if you're someone else, it might be a road-like, kind of a roguelike, or I feel like I saw another couple of like stupid punny genre things. It's from Ironwood Studios. It's their debut title, published by Kepler Interactive. And like, it's you in a freaky little car. Not even really a freaky little car. It's you in a freaky little setting. Story-wise,
an awful little car. The worst car.
Don't say that, because people love that car.
The worst car, parentheses, affectionate.
Yes, exactly. Driving around freaky Pacific Northwest, trying to get out of freaky Pacific Northwest area.
Yes, it's very roadside picnic, stalker inspired.
Yes.
But you have a car.
And it came out for just the PlayStation 5. PlayStation 5 only.
Yeah.
Notably. And Windows.
See? Who says the PS5 doesn't have games?
Imagine how great it'll look on the Pro.
It's got the car game.
The killer app. One question raised for me as I read about this being in the Pacific Northwest and specifically near Forks, and also as I was just on a flight half watching Twilight that the woman in front of me, Catty Corner, was watching.
Yeah.
In her in-flight entertainment, is where is Edward Cullen in all of this?
That's a good question.
Like, probably there and involved.
He's probably there. It's one of the little, what are the little freaks called that you meet?
What?
They're like little guys in the zone called like, are they called like tourists or something?
Oh, I did not encounter that.
Yeah, you can find little freaks that'll like either mess you up or try to help you. Yeah, tourists. Like little crash test dummies.
I feel like one of them should be the Cullens.
That's a good mod idea.
What?
Modders. modders out there, could you change the tourists to models of the live-action cast of Twilight, please?
And when you drive up to them, can we set this music on your car radio to be Supermassive Black Hole by Muse?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That'd be good.
It's probably already coming in the free update, but let's get ahead of it. Yeah, you're known as the driver. Which
yes.
I have to say, nobody has names anymore in games.
Well,
names are out.
They've talked about with this that they really just wanted it to be you, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're the driver, but you do not vocalize at all or interact with react to the plot in any particular way. So it was very intentionally in this, like, it's you, it's your relationship with the car, right? So that's why there's no name for this guy. The scientists you talk to do have names.
I won't argue with that. I'm just making the observation that names for the player character are out and role descriptors are in.
One of the scientists is named Oppie, which if I was a scientist and that was my name, I would change it, I think.
Does Oppenheimer exist, do we think, in this alternate timeline?
Surely. Why would he not exist in this alternate timeline?
I don't know. It's just hard to confirm.
I guess.
He probably already would have had the dibs. He's already probably has the dibs on the scientist who sometimes goes by Oppie, right? So...
yeah, fair.
It just seems crazy for there to be two of those.
Yeah. But yeah, just saying. My name was Oppie, and I was like, I think I want to be a scientist.
I know. I might insist that people call me something a little bit more professional.
Other than Oppie.
Like,
Dr. Oppie.
Like, I have a doctorate. I do freaky research. How about you don't call me, like, a name that sounds appropriate for, like, a Saturday cartoon dog.
The other scientists' names are Tobias and Francis, which, if those are also references to famous scientists, they're less obvious, and so I do not get them.
They're also more normal-sounding names.
Yeah.
Those are names people could have had as scientists in the 50s.
I have to assume that Oppie is, like, a purposeful thing, right?
Yeah, it has to be.
She's a woman, by the way.
Still gotta be purposeful. Is another game set in the halcyon days before cell phones.
Right, yeah.
It's an alternate timeline, but it's set in 1998, which, like, and, like, GPS, right? I guess more relevant for this game, set before your car has a Bluetooth speaker.
I feel like even, if they had set it in the modern times, like, they could have been like, oh, it doesn't work in the zone. I think this was maybe more about the type of car that they wanted to feature. Perhaps.
Totally, and agreed, but also just notable. Just another, like, we can't have a freaky game that exists in the same era as Google Maps. It's just not allowed.
You can't have a car game and, like, actually this would be funny if you find a car and it just has, like, the big touchscreen dashboard.
Yeah.
Another way to make a really awful car.
Yeah. Wait, I can't.
How many buttons do I have to press?
I can't do anything. Greasy fingers. But yeah, you know, to set up the story of the game, the story is not, like, it's there, but it's not the main draw of the game. You're, like, a person driving around the Pacific Northwest in your dope little station wagon, and you accidentally end up, like, driving to the edge of and then being teleported into what's called the Pacific Exclusion Zone, which is an area where, you know, back in this alternate history, there was this, like, technology developed in the 40s that seemed like it was going to be super cool and great, and then wasn't.
Probably by Oppenheimer, right?
Yeah, exactly. So some parallels here for sure. So it started causing problems, like anomalies. And for a while, the U.S. Advanced Resonance Development Agency, ARDA, had an area in this Pacific Exclusion Zone where they were researching this technology. But then in the 80s, that agency shut down and they just sealed it off. And so you now have been accidentally warped into this zone of freaky stuff. And with the help of these three scientists, who are just, like, voices on your radio.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to help you get out because the car. So like it's not your car. Like you were driving a car, but then you find another car when you get warped in.
Well, your car is like exploded and is floating around you when you wake up,
right.
Essentially.
So not a good day for that car. No. But now this new car, unfortunately, is probably trying to take over your brain.
Well, it just is affected by the anomaly as well.
Yeah.
Right? One, it's a severe downgrade from your old car.
Boo.
So in the first parts of the game, you're dealing a lot with like typical car problems as well. Like your tires keep going flat or, things are breaking or whatever, right? So there's some fixing of the car for that. But your car can also develop quirks, which essentially is like a system under the hood that causes something else to happen whenever you take a particular action on the car. Some of these are more difficult to manage than others.
People had mixed feelings about this system in the reviews.
I read a little bit about like they made sure that like really like bad quirks would not happen. Like for example, taking a car out of park would not put it back into park as a quirk, right? But sometimes it's stuff like if you open the trunk, the horn honks, right? Or if you go in reverse, the headlights start blinking. Or when you start the car, the passenger side door opens, or stuff like that. Which you can fix these quirks if you decide to in like your home base thing with some like a material that you can craft. You just have to like sort of identify the quirk and then you're able to fix it. But sometimes it may not be something that's actually harmful. It may just be like annoying or strange, in which case you might choose to save your resources and just allow that quirk to exist in your car as well.
Much like a real car.
Yeah. So the main sort of gameplay loop of this is you have like this home base garage. When in there you can spend time like updating your car, which they've made like you have to like pick stuff up around the environment, find the correct place on the car to use it. So they make it very much like you're mechanic-ing this car, right? You don't just go into a menu and do it. You load up with your supplies, right? You make sure you have enough fuel, and then you go out on an expedition to fill in areas of the map, collect more stuff that you can use to upgrade your car, so on and so forth, right? And then you come back, upgrade your car, you can go out on further expeditions, and essentially the goal is to get your car in good enough shape and you comfortable enough in the zone to go to like the center, which will help you get out of the zone.
But that's really hard.
Yes. Hence why you have to upgrade this really awful, terrible car that you have found.
Can I ask a somewhat political question?
Okay.
Do you think that Tim Walz and his gamer son would enjoy playing this game together?
I don't know. The main two comparisons I saw were Outer Wilds and Subnautica.
Yeah.
So, did they enjoy either of those games? I don't know. So, I don't know.
Somebody's got to ask. No, just because he's a car guy. I did see an interesting, not funny, but like that's interesting, like Reddit thread where someone was like, I'm playing Pacific Drive. Can you give me some good games to play like at the same time as I'm playing this? Right? Some like nice compatible, like simultaneous, not simultaneous, but like other games to be playing at the same time. I was like, dang, should I be curating my life that way?
It's an interesting question. I feel like the compatible game would be one that's like very different though.
Yeah, everyone was sort of suggesting Outer Wilds or like Stalker or Subnautica, but I was like, you don't want the same game.
Yeah. Because then you'll get confused about the differences between them, right? If they're similar enough. It's like when you play action games and the attack button is on different buttons, right? And you're trying to play two of them at the same time. It doesn't work very well.
Like, I feel like you should be playing Forza with this.
That's a funny one. But you get confused about the different driving controls.
That's true. That's fair. I think about it, put more thought into it.
The car in Pacific Drive is a pretty fiddly a take on driving controls purposely. I did appreciate, I read the Eurogamer review of it, and they said pretty quickly got the achievement for trying to move the car without taking it out of park 20 times.
Wow.
Because you don't really do that in a lot of games where you drive a car, right? They don't make you, like, put it in or out of park. It just sort of happens as you get in and out of the car.
You press the button and you go.
Yeah. But in this, you have to change sort of the drive shift, you have to turn things on and off as you need them, so you're very much messing with the car. And I believe it's also, like, locked to, like, a first-person view in the driver's seat, which is what I don't know how people drive with that view in games.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't have any peripheral vision, so it's not really, like, simulating the way that you drive in real life, because you can't really see...
like, rear view mirrors or anything coming up on the side. Yeah.
Without, like, actually turning to look at them. So it's interesting. I don't know. I assume if you play a number of things that way, your brain gets used to it as its own method of driving. But
no, it is interesting to think about, though, in a game that does a lot to, obviously a very unrealistic environment, but does a lot to simulate the real experience of, dear God, car maintenance is an ongoing and tedious and horrible task. To have to be like, well, but, like, car driving involves a lot of, like, very minute shifts of attention.
Yeah. And
that's, like, a hard thing to capture in a game. Without getting extremely fiddly with it.
Yeah.
There's also another of these roguelikes that does not let you save mid-run.
Well, yeah.
I feel like that's becoming less and less common of a thing, though. I think you can't put it down.
Yeah, but, like, I don't think the runs out are as long as
no, they're not.
Like
that wasn't a complaint. It was just an observation of, like, okay, that's becoming something that, like, we're babying people on a lot more, and they have opted not to.
Yeah.
They did also just, in an update this month, add some pretty robust difficulty sliders, which I thought was interesting. Some preset modes, right? So, like, somewhere it's like, you can't die, or the crafting is a lot easier. People really liked this game overall, but there were definitely some reviews that were, did not love how repetitive and fiddly it could get to be continually crafting, like, the chemicals that you need to make really basic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always really hard. This is another one. I'm like, we all know that I love a roguelike, and in case anyone was wondering, I've not played Balatro in, like, at least a week and a half.
Whew.
So we're moving on. We're reclaiming our lives. But I was a little tempted to pick this one up too, potentially when I have a little more time. So I'm always curious when things are like, it's kind of, like, not grindy exactly, but particular or fiddly or a lot of menuing. I'm like, well, how does that jive with how I feel about that? Like, will that bother me?
Mm-hmm. I read one interview with the main guy, with Seth Rosen, the game director.
Yeah.
That he talked about the, like, how he thinks about survival games. And he tends to dislike a lot of them, actually, apparently, because he sort of mentally classifies them into the tree puncher and tree hugger spectrum.
What does that mean?
Well, the tree puncher game is the one where, like, you go out, you get the stuff from the environment. It's, like, mostly done around, like, taking, right?
Yeah.
You go, you chop down trees, you take stuff, and so on and so forth, versus the tree hugger games, which was his goal for this, and is apparently his preferred type, where it's more about figuring where you fit into the environment and interacting with the environment versus just using the environment for your own gain, which I thought was an interesting way to think about it.
That is an interesting kind of duality scale.
And he considers stuff like Outer Wilds and I think Subnautica to be like more on the tree hugger type spectrum.
That makes sense to me.
And there's also sort of like those games have a little bit more like you don't just sort of like taper off, right? Where if you're just punching and getting things, eventually you'll reach like a high level of like, well, there's nothing really else to do, right? Yeah. And you sort of get that with these games, but it's more like, oh, okay, you've reached sort of the more narrative type objective, more than like, I've conquered the environment around me, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's a lovely way of thinking about it, especially for a game about like a weird little car.
I don't play a lot of survival games, so I don't think about them too much, I guess. Yeah. But this did help me put into perspective like the different types that fall under that genre.
Did you also read any of the interviews with them where they talked about all the stuff they did to like get the car noises?
No.
So the founder of the studio, the other guy I just mentioned, Alex Dracott, like he has a station wagon that they sort of used for a lot of the like management of this. So they did a lot of like bouncing on the car, right? Like sliding down the car, hitting the car with branches. But also apparently they were like in like outside of a small town and they had like rigged up the car with like 10 different microphones and were like parked on the side of the road somewhere trying to record audio. And then the cops came over and they were like, what's going on here, buddies? Like, you're distracting people on the road. This is dangerous. You've got to leave town.
I do always love hearing about the things that people do to get Foley.
Yeah. And they were like, this car did not have air conditioning. It was hot. We had like gaff taped all of the like little holes in it so that we'd get better recording. So very DIY. They were like, most people take it to like a fancy recording place to get car noises, but we were just like hitting it with sticks.
You could do that in a fancy recording place, surely.
You could.
Hit the car with sticks.
They also, did you see in this newest update, they added an option for a difficulty setting where if you turn it on, accidentally closing the trunk on your head kills you.
You know, true to life.
Which makes me wonder how easy that is to do in the game. That seems like an odd thing to do if that's not something people are doing by accident all the time. But this game did bring to mind me how, you know, for most of the time in games, I think, except in things like a Forza or whatever, a vehicle is really just like kind of a bonus, right? It's like you get to move 50% faster, or you aren't, you know, you don't have to look at the world around you. You can just go.
Yeah.
And so like how not very often is that vehicle itself like very integrated in the gameplay or in the like as a character. So even in this one, it's not like the car isn't like talking to you, right?
Right.
But it's very much like a character that you probably become attached to in its own way as your sole physical companion in the wilderness.
Well, and also because, you know, in upgrading your car, right, there's a bit of like RPG elements to this game. So usually that sort of customization is kept for your character, and a lot of games wouldn't necessarily want to add like a whole other like upgrading system, especially if they have like really detailed sort of RPG things. So I think that's why it doesn't happen. But because the car is essentially like your character and the way that you improve right over the course of the game, like it becomes its own thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, any last thoughts, or should we mash?
I had avoided thinking about the mashup at all until this exact moment, and I'm like, this sucks.
The 20-game saga of a car.
Pixar will sue us. Sorry to say.
It doesn't look... You can have a sentient car. Pixar does not have the patent for a sentient car. I'm
unclear
pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so there's like, you know, a typical sort of RPG plot going on, but technically your main character is the car.
Like a talking car?
Good question.
Like,
maybe...
I'll be real. Let me be real with you. One version of this that you could make is Final Fantasy 15.
You're kind of right. You don't really upgrade your car in Final Fantasy 15.
I'm
you
not
sort
saying
of
it's
do.
a perfect mashup. I'm just
fly
saying that
eventually. But
there is an element of this that would just be Final Fantasy 15.
Well, you know what? Someone should make Final Fantasy 15 again, so that's fine. So one of the appeals also of the Trails series is because as time goes on, you see like the advancements in technology in the world and society as things goes, and so in Sky things are much less advanced than in Cold Steel, where they have internet now and stuff.
Internet.
So there's something like the car upgrading over time, right? Like it's abilities and communication potential growing as the games progress, because of course this can't be just one game, right? We have to make like at least 6.
No, a series is definitely part of this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how it would work, but
like, would it be a car?
It's as long as the Lord of the Rings, of course.
Like the easier way to do this is to make it like a boat or something, or like an airship.
Sure.
Right? Like that feels like a little bit more in line with the kind of classic RPG of it all.
Or maybe a bike.
Okay, say more.
To scale it down even a little bit. Because there's already something like, whenever there's a character with a bike, right? They love their bike.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not that there aren't characters who love their cars, but I feel like it's like an essential thing. Like in an RPG, you got a character with a bike. That's their bike, right?
Yeah.
So you could, if we didn't want to like have like a whole airship, although I guess you could make it into sort of like a management game if you had an airship. Like there's some gameplay in terms of like managing your crew and ensuring that the airship is...
And that does seem kind of in line with the kind of auto shop portion of
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I just think there's not enough to add to a bike. Like I think if we were wanting this to be a 10-game epic, right? Look, I love nothing I love more than super die Gurren Lagann, right? But and like, you know, apply that to your mech anime of choice. But I think that's hard. I think that with a bike eventually we would hit like, this just looks so silly that it's not cool anymore. It's just like now the bike has a rocket launcher.
Sure. Well, you could also do one where it's just like the main character has a bike. That's their main companion. Instead of cheerful girl, sullen boy, we have cheerful girl, sullen bike.
Not very talkative bike.
Yeah. The dynamic that everybody wants, honestly.
I don't want a bike.
Get the boy out of there. Put in the bike.
Bikes over boys.
Bikes over boys. That's what they all say.
That is what they say. That's a common phrase.
Bikes over boys over flowers. That's the full saying.
I don't even need to say anything because we all know that. No, I do think like airship, like beloved airship RPG could be good.
Sure.
I feel like there's something to that.
Like you play as like a crew,
sort
of. More than any like individual person.
Yeah, you like start off, it's like a ragtag group and it's a pretty small airship. And like slowly over time you build it up to be magnificent. And maybe there's a game where we lose that for a while. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm worried. I hope this isn't just like the plot of One Piece, right? Like, possible.
They don't have an airship.
I know they don't have an airship, but they have like a boat, right?
They do lose their boat at one point in One Piece, but I think that's just
that's
part of that
be a
sort of
unique story
storytelling.
element only in One Piece, right?
I know, yeah.
No one has ever lost a boat before.
Yeah. I don't know if their boat, like, they really, like, upgrade their boat.
What are the gears for, then?
Aren't that for the characters?
I'm just kidding. That was a joke.
I don't know. I don't know how One Piece works. I don't know what the One Piece is.
I also don't know what the one... Like, that's... Our listeners to the end are like, wow, these two have lost all credibility.
No, I don't think they know what the One Piece is yet in the manga either.
They don't even know what it is. They've been looking for it for decades.
It's like the legendary treasure, but like specifically.
We should have that in our series, not the One Piece, but like some kind of legendary treasure that we actually don't even know what it is.
Sure. And in the sixth game of the series, we introduce Max.
Yes. Well, I do think we could have the radio thing too, right? If we're in the airship, right? We could have a beloved like air traffic controller character who we don't actually meet in person until like game 5. That'd be huge, right?
Yeah.
Like we'd be like, wow, like we love Joshua on the ground.
Yeah, the great name, Joshua.
Great Japanese name, Joshua. And then, like, finally, you finally meet him.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's Fairy Trails.
Yeah.
What it's worth. We love to talk about people, like, 4 games before they're introduced.
Well, I think we're onto something here.
Yeah.
Listeners, how would you play our, like, airship maintenance RPG series? Have you been convinced that you should start the Trails series along with me at some point? Did hearing all this stuff about car maintenance make you feel like you ought to like look at that check engine light on your car? Do you have a car? I don't. But if you have thoughts about any of this or anything else that we talked about on the show, hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat where Emma's about to pick our new games, and read our blog featuring long-running series Click My Boyfriend and Split Screen. But most importantly, if you enjoyed the show, you should subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, anywhere that you can find podcasts. You can probably find Talk This. Next week, is it my side quest? Where even are we? I'm lost in time.
I think it's my side quest.
Right, because I did that. That's too expensive.
Yes.
Last time.
Yeah.
If I really want Disney to come after me, I just did it. But in 2 weeks, what are we going to be talking about?
In 2 weeks, for our old game, we're going to be talking about Limbo.
What?
Limbo.
Limbo. I heard Elmo.
We're talking about Elmo, of course. Elmo's ABCs. No, Limbo. And for our new game, we're going to be talking about Banishers, Ghosts of New Eden.
So look forward to that in 2 weeks.
Spooky, just for the start of spooky season.
Isn't it already the start of spooky season? We'll be in the middle of spooky season.
For the middle of spooky season.
Well, that's it for this week's show. Thanks for listening. Emma, send them riding off into the sunset.
This week, anticipate the return.